Katana Zero made waves when it came out. Despite its story ending on a cliffhanger 6 years ago, it's firmly placed as being an indie game classic in many circles online, due to its brutally quick gameplay and a narrative that's one of the best anti-drug PSAs in gaming, with only a hint of terrifying time manipulation. However, when I want my fix, I tend to look for recommendations. There hasn't been anything out there that really scratched my itch, until now. Today's title separates itself from other 80s lit katana-wielding murder machines by focusing on one of my favorite mechanics in gaming. 2 words: grappling hook. Sanabi was made by Wonder Potion in 2023 for PC and the Switch. This was their first commercial game, and they came out swinging. Let's listen to the title theme. It doesn't just burst out the gate, but creeps in before going off. Fittingly, it's an ascent. There are signs of first game syndrome here and there, but Sanabi does so many things right that it puts many other games to shame. The CEO of Wonder Potion and lead developer of Sanabi, Yu Sung-hyung, actually got the idea to make Sanabi during his mandatory military service. Being deprived of his hobbies, he was forced to reevaluate his life going forward, so he made video games. Man, that's so real. Taking inspiration from the games he played previously, Portal, Outer Wilds, Skyrim, to name a few, and Phoenix Wright, surprisingly. The former 3 seem to have contributed to the freeform gameplay and immersion into the world of Sanabi. And while I never would have guessed that the series that gave us Dead Man to be associated with this game, you can see how it might have influenced some of the characters and parts of the narrative. With enough background, let's start. Our story begins, and we're dadding it up. Like any single parent with a robot arm, he's enjoying retirement by hanging out with his kid. She shows us the scarecrow she made, and we gotta get some raspberries. So just like that, we're thrown in the tutorial. I'll elaborate more during the gameplay section, so we'll just move on for now. After killing some dinosaurs, we got one more game before we cap off our day. It's hide and seek, but we forgot the walkie-talkies, so our little girl goes back home to pick them up. Unfortunately, there's something waiting for her. It's a Ford Pinto. The events of that day still haunt you, everything playing on a loop. A bomb meant for you was instead found by your daughter. You've made many enemies during your career as a brigadier general for the royal court, but you have a history of not leaving any loose ends, all except one. Sanabi. Now it's all you have left. Revenge. It took some digging, but you find out who supplied the explosives, and why 90% of the enemy roster consists of robots. But just like that, our lead runs cold, until we get picked up by our old outfit, with some important intel. An incident has occurred in Mago City. The nearly 3 million citizens have all but vanished and the networks have gone dark in just 24 hours. Was this a wide-scale evacuation? Or maybe the work of the military-grade peacekeeping androids stalking the streets, hunting those with low social credit? Something of this scale. We're inclined to believe Sanabi is responsible. Out of all the investigation teams sent to the city, we've only heard from one individual, claiming to know more about the blackout. A young computer engineer named Mari. Your mission is to rendezvous with her and bring her out of the city, and, at your request, we're enforcing Operation Zero. You're going in alone. There are 2 problems, however. Our pilot, Mike, got into an accident after he struck an innocent 90mm anti-aircraft shell, so even when we do find Mari, we'll have to find a different way to get out of the city. But with her help, we do learn something. The network blackout wasn't the goal, but a side effect. For some reason, all data within the city has been wiped clean. The same goes for all internal networks as well. You send a bunch of small teams into an empty city, with nothing to find and no way to contact the outside. It's no wonder they all went missing. At the same time, the city's nuclear reactor is getting a little toasty, so we should probably look into that real quick. So we're stuck with no intel, and with so many robots gunning for you specifically, it's like the city itself is descending upon us. However, Mari does know a shocking amount of information about Mago City, and if she's going to help us track down Sanabi, we're going to need all the help we can get. At Mari's request, we have to go straight to the highest point in the city, Mago HQ, and to that end, finding Sanabi. Now, it's difficult for me to recommend a game that I'm excited about by simply saying, just trust me, because most of the game's best moments come from you going in completely blind, so I'll do my best to skirt around the spoilers for now until I have to bring out the timestamp. But for now, let's talk about the presentation. From the moment you boot up that title screen, the game makes a strong impression. From the trailers and what you've seen already, you'll know that this game is predominantly pixels, so you know something's special when they whip out the 3D. Against the absolute scale of the backgrounds, the people are approaching the size of bacteria, especially if you're playing on the Switch port, like I did for my first run. But this isn't a bad thing. The game requires you to have a good scope of the environment, recognizing threats and knowing what surfaces you can use to zip around at high speeds. So it makes sense that the camera zoomed out, but also, look at that sprite art. Even when raining and under the cover of night, the backgrounds are downright gorgeous, an aspect that only gets better as you climb to the higher parts of the city. As you get to the end, you can just glance at some of these and pick up so many small details. I also love the dynamic lighting in some scenes. This can add tension to an already serious moment, but in the right context, certain colors hold a meaning thematically to some characters. It's such a visual treat. One of the contributing factors to the game is its length. All the pixel art is nice, and the areas don't overstay their welcome, because it took me a little over 4 hours on my first run. But hammering home the dystopian themes, Mago City is divided into various sectors that are vertically stacked on each other, kinda like the technological pizza that was Midgar. The emphasis on verticality leads to some really fun level ideas that all have a diegetic reason to exist. Because Mago City was built onto a mountain, the business district is high enough to be among the clouds. To help with logistics, we got vertical trains, flying cargo containers, and effing worms too, just to name a few. The crazy huge scale and detailed sprite work is really fun to look at, even when I'm Spider-Manning my way through everything. Even the enemies do a good job of being noticeable. The combat areas can have darker backgrounds to contrast with the enemies' lighter palettes. But as you go to higher levels, the enemies evolve as well, getting more elaborate designs like these neon streaks for robots in the business district. Even here, everything is readable, which is unfortunately all I have to say about the enemies, save for the final area. They're Mago Group's mass-produced enforcers, and their designs don't really stick out to me. It is an interesting detail that Mago City doesn't have its own police force. They own the city, so there aren't any official government entities within. They have peacekeeper combat androids. With everything zoomed out and the almost non-existent HUD, you'll never lose track of your enemies. The UI elements are pretty passive all around, but when there are changes, they make it very obvious. But don't let this all distract you from the fact that even in the business district, not a soul can be seen. No signs of a struggle, no damaged buildings, there aren't even any animals. No dogs, no cats, no children, or even rats. Without the music, it'd be downright haunting to walk around here. As for our characters, if you showed me a lineup of our leads, I would not have pegged the Brigadier General to be our protagonist. This guy's design screams rival or recurring mid-boss. Maybe it's the red and black, but more likely, it's the wide brim hat. Yu Sung-hyung mentioned that the Brigadier General's uniform was inspired by the Joseon dynasty, which ruled over Korea for almost 500 years until 1910. I'm not the biggest Korea boo around, but the hats in this case are meant to denote status. Historically, a very traditional way of conveying rank. In Sanabi's case, let's compare Colonel Beck with the General. While our hat is more traditional with the rope and red tassel, the Colonel's, while still having the red rope, the edges are more ruffled and make me think of a GI's boonie hat. The silhouette keeps with the cultural theming while making it visually more modern. It conveys how old school the General is compared to his more tactical peers, and it's befitting the establishment known as the Royal Court. Like, even without the chain arm, he's lagging behind with the body enhancements, as they are way less subtle. I honestly thought he just had some wicked sideburns. And speaking of outdated, let's address the cat construction-sized elephant in the room. The standout here is obviously the metal arms the military has. Every high-ranking member seems to be augmented in one way or another, but compared to Major Song and Colonel Beck, your arm looks clunky and it's huge. If I had to make a comparison, it's like holding up a 2005 Gundam model kit to a more modern one. The earlier designs were more angular with rounded edges, while the later ones were, well, modernized, slimmed down and ergonomic. And going back to Sanabi, their special ability is way less apparent. That's honestly one of my favorite aspects in regards to Sanabi's storytelling and world building. Like, Look at the pictures of the previous generals at HQ with their cool hats. You know they all had cool robot arms too. Less is more here. There's a lot of subtext and small details in the dialogue and the world itself that are never explicitly told to the player, but it's real fun picking up on these things and letting your mind go wild. Originally, there would have been more world building details in the form of notes or maybe even audio logs strewn all over the city, but in the end, the team wanted to keep the character drama front and center without any distractions. While I would have preferred to learn more about those in power, keeping many things ambiguous actually makes the setting more intriguing in most cases. And to give them credit, yeah, the relationship between the general and Mari develops really nicely over the course of the story. The narrative remains focused, and I have no complaints. But going back to details, just because we got tiny player sprites doesn't mean they skimped on the animations. Mari here is where a lot of the charm comes from. She's your expressive comic relief sidekick, but she's never grating, and she's your in when it comes to knowing things about Mago City. She clearly knows way more about the situation than she's letting on, but she can't be all that bad if she's helping us, right? My favorite is how when she's explaining parts of her plan, these little doodles are actually drawings she's making on the walls, and you can tell they had a lot of fun animating her. She always has something to do and she's never treated as a damsel in distress, because she's capable enough to get herself and even you out of trouble. She's the perfect partner for the Brigadier General, because he's kind of a wet blanket, but I mean, I can't really blame the guy. I mean, even if his face is covered 90% of the time, you can still tell what he's feeling with those animations, and if you think the visuals look good, wait until you hear the music. There are many times within the story cutscenes and even during gameplay where you're just allowed to sit down and listen to Sanabi, and other times you get reminded why there's a speedrunning option on the title screen. The techno soundtrack done by Invader 303 and Cloudy Day complement the gameplay perfectly. It gets you pumped to tackle all the challenges Mago City throws at you. One thing to point out is that most of the time, the music doesn't go straight into Carpenter Brut territory. Much like the mechanics, Sanabi does a good job of getting you warmed up before throwing you into the techno tumble dryer. If you want Turbo Killer, you gotta earn it. But the standout tracks would have to be those save for cutscenes. They're still techno, some of them have the Blade Runner synths, but they're slower, suspenseful, and sometimes haunting. We are here to uncover a mystery after all. Well, some of us. The sound design for the basic enemies is serviceable, with the bosses being the star of the show in that regard. A lot of the good sounds are saved for you specifically. Dispatching enemies makes a very distinct and chunky pop. It's satisfying, but I wanted to focus on one thing. Despite how that chain arm of yours lets you move around at a breakneck speed, and how it extends and retracts so fast it may as well be instant, but this thing is the size of a Bernese. Imagine hitting anything with that. Well, you won't have to, because the cutscenes are there to remind you that the chain hook is heavier than a Ford truck. In short, the game's sound design and music is absolutely stellar, and I can't say too much here without getting into spoilers, so let's finally get to the point. How does it play? In our dad-themed tutorial, we're shown the basic movement, grappling, and wall crawling, but my favorite has to be the boost. As long as you're off the ground and connected to a surface, you can just create your own momentum. This is your bread and butter, and is the main catalyst for why this game is so fun. Without a doubt, the movement in Sanabi is some of the smoothest I've experienced in a 2D platformer. Release the hook early to clear the distance, use it as an evasive maneuver, or just reverse your momentum entirely. Do everything in your power to go fast. There isn't a parry. You don't need one. Instead, you get a brief window of invincibility while the speed trails out. After grappling an enemy, you propel yourself depending on the direction you're holding, knock enemies into hazards, or get in the right spot to jump on someone else. It's not crucial to know who to grab first, but chaining a series of grabs together and wiping out the enemy before they get the chance to be a nuisance is when I knew this game was special. The speed is so visceral, and grappling from enemy to enemy feels so sick. Getting hit causes the music to skip for a second, which sucks after hitting the ouchie hurt lasers for the 30th time, but even taking a hit can be beneficial. Taking damage, whether on purpose or not, can help you reposition and even save some time. Again, you're here to move. You'd think with an arm that bulky, you'd have no problem pulling things to you. And you'd be right, but that's boring. If I can take a page from Daddy Knoll, don't reach your goal by eating the squeezy beef. What's important is how you get there, because if you compromise aspects of your life solely to reach the end, what will you have when you finally get there? You don't even get the ability to retract your chain until the second chapter, which might sound like an issue, but your base abilities are already so versatile, you almost don't notice. And if you're focused on being as fast as possible, you'll be wall running as little as possible. Yu Sung-hyung mentioned how the grappling hook was based off the ninja rope from the Worm series, as he was disappointed that there wasn't a game that was solely based around rope action, so he just made his own. Bionic Commando was a third-person shooter, or a platformer depending on who you ask, and Spider-Man games are almost always beat-em-ups, so I kind of understand where he's coming from. I'm firmly in the camp of grappling hook supremacy. If it were up to me, everyone would unconditionally love DMC4. Sanabi is the kind of game that occupies a weird space for me. It's a platformer, sure, but it gets me hyped like a platinum game. So much in fact that I'd call it character action adjacent. You don't quite have a rival in this game, not in the character action game sense anyway. In Sanabi, time is your biggest enemy, and as a result, Major Song is the closest thing this game has to a Virgil. I'm not motivated to beat Major Song because her ideologies or because she says clanker with a hard R. It's because she set another record, and I'm not leaving until I beat it. So with every return visit to the training grounds, you know it's time to lock in. But it's not a hack and slash or a beat 'em up like DMC or God Hand. Well, neither was Vanquish, and that's still the pinnacle of the genre for me.
War is not economic stimulus. San Francisco is gone now.
That was for the good of all Americans.
I wonder how many people thought this was a Metal Gear clip. I don't want to get into the minutia of defining a nebulous genre like character action, but I wanted to put into words, through my own hyperfixation, how much fun my first playthrough was, and on the other hand, some of the things that made me want to take a long walk off a short pier. My toxic trait with a new game is to complain when the highest difficulty isn't unlocked by default, and usually I enjoy 2D platformers with a controller, but Sanabi is a special case. Even thinking of playing on legendary difficulty with anything other than the mouse and keyboard would cause me to suffer an ancestral diversion for higher development moment, and then I take a cold shower. Chapter 3, despite its hiccups, has some of the best atmosphere in the game. The factory is there to remind you that just because you're an augmented high-speed grappling machine with a body count doesn't mean you're the top of the food chain. The aesthetic is so good because for the entire time you're here, the camera's perspective doesn't change. This place is so big that you're always staring at the other half of the factory. You're smaller than you've ever felt in the slums or the business district, making me wonder how Wonder Potion would do if they ever made a full-blown horror game. Not only does it have a track on par with the Sonic drowning music, this section rekindled something deep within me, a fear I only experienced when I played Metroid Fusion for the first time. The factory is also the least appealing area in the eyes of many players, because of one section with a time constraint, making it too difficult. These are the same people saying that playing on easy mode doesn't make them immune to the instant death lasers. What does the difficulty change? How much health you regenerate after not getting hit for a few seconds? Auto-aiming is a separate option. I want to believe that Wonder Potion had enough faith in the player being able to beat their game without needing to dumb down the level design on lower difficulties. And from the early trailers, you can see that some of the levels actually looked more closed off and narrow. We potentially got the easier game. These are probably the same people that unironically want a chicken head in every game. They cannot fathom the concept of narrative elements being woven into gameplay. They won't question the nature of this factory and why it's armed to the teeth with weapons of war. And I'm not just talking about production. I mean, why is the Fanuc manufacturing arm responsible for making the Nintendo Switch equipped with thermobaric weaponry? They don't care. They'd probably have an aneurysm if they had to play on controller. Difficulty isn't the topic of concern here, as it takes more than a game's difficulty to detract from the overall experience, at least when it's intended. Slow-mo precision aiming. You might not have even known this existed, because if you're using a mouse and keyboard, it doesn't. But for those on the Switch, it's not even a bad inclusion. It's good for slowing down tense moments, or you can just see it as an accessibility feature. Ultimately, this isn't even a complaint with the mechanic, but rather how much heavy lifting it does when using a controller. You move and aim with the left stick instead of controlling both independently. On paper, I understand the decision. In practice, I hate it. I can't keep my forward momentum and aim at the same time without using the slowdown. It makes fights more cumbersome than cool. It's so frustrating because at least in the early game, it's fine. But in later sections, it's just a hair too frustrating for me to recommend. If mouse and keyboard is like cruising down an empty freeway, then using the sticks are like driving in a school zone made almost entirely of speed bumps. To those playing on PC while using a pad, why? You like griefing yourself? Do you also mutilate your senses because you like the challenge? I can't speak for the experiences of others, but if I fumble another hook and get flashbanged for the 15th time today, I might just die. Playing high execution games on the Switch makes me feel old, and my ego can only handle so much abuse before I hit the sauce again and go back to playing Dota with those filthy Ohioans. So why don't I just use auto-aim then? Okay, so the last thing to cover before I close off this review. Without spoilers, there are parts of the story that seem obvious, even if you're playing it for the first time, but it's more about the smaller questions that come up. You get many glimpses about the greater setting that make you wonder how everything is connected in a good way. Again, I apologize for being so vague. I can't say too much without context, and if I go farther than that, I'll be revealing too much. This game will probably take you about 4 hours, and the payoffs are well worth your time. And all I have to say is play the game before watching this section. I'm gonna reveal more things about the plot, but we aren't gonna go too deep. I contemplated trying to do a story analysis for the endgame, but after 4 pages it sounded like a wiki article. This isn't a warning, it's a threat, as I guarantee that your experience will be severely worse if you don't uncover the mysteries for yourself. So for your sake, viewer, if you want to jump straight to my endorsement, then go to here. In a typical cyberpunk dystopia, the Walmarts and Buc-ee's megacorporations of the world would be the ruling authority, and with Mago Group having a mega city as their headquarters, you definitely get that vibe. So, is Mago City governed by its own laws? Not entirely, for as big as Mago Group is, they still have to operate under the royal court. What counts as a serious crime in cyberpunk Korea? AIs are regulated but still legal. It becomes an issue when you talk about anything beyond that. Mago City's peacekeepers are combat robots for sure, but their biggest flaw is how rigidly they follow their programming and are easily exploited. Their strength is in numbers and not tactics. But what if they had both? Mago Group had an answer. What if you could take an experienced soldier and recreate their personality, experiences, memories and all as files on a computer, a digital soul?
You deserve a chair!
Personality data. The existence of such a thing is seen as a Class 1 violation in the eyes of the royal court. Forget developing or even thinking about it. It's high treason. Those caught wouldn't just suffer the consequences. Everyone you would ever know, 10 generations of people, multiplied by every employee that ever saw the inside of a Mago facility, would be removed in order to keep that information from ever threatening the royal court. That's why Mago cut out the middleman. After stealing a Costco gold card from nobody in particular, we discover what happens when company secrets are leaked. Commence the penultimate solution. Delete all data, no matter how inconsequential. Take your own life in any way you want. And as a final precaution, overload the city's nuclear reactor to bury any evidence. It's a lot harder to find anything specific when the crime scene looks like Chernobyl. This all confirms what Mari said. The blackout was just a side effect of something bigger. We know staggeringly little about the royal court, but even with their practically unfathomable power, it's made apparent that they feel threatened by something. Despite initiating Operation Zero, we get introduced to my favorite enemy type in the game, the Tomb Troops. These are the first robots in the city that aren't affiliated with Mago Group. They're military robots that, unfortunately for us, specialize in scorched earth tactics, and they're here to deal with the reactor meltdown and potentially any unsavory characters. But how? With no communication to the outside, how did they know about the reactor meltdown? And if they knew so much about the city, then why are you even here? And why are we only seeing them now? But we still need answers. Even with the army in our way, we need to make it to the end, to the top of the city, Mago HQ. And it's empty. But unlike before, there are traces of activity. Bottles half empty, but no people. Surprisingly, some servers are still up and running. And Mari informs us that there's a signal coming from somewhere inside this building. But she also confirms something else. Sanabi is in the basement. Never has a game sold me so much on the initial premise like Sanabi has. The swinging is fun and satisfying. The music's thematic significance, with its gradual rises and falls, made everything so excellent. But it's the story that really keeps you going. This game uses so many cliches, and it still caught me off guard in some places. Like you're a Korean Rad Spencer in a cyberpunk city with the backstory of Max Payne. And you have a spunky sidekick who acts like your man in the chair. Everything seems like a typical revenge story, but then a revelation charges out of the bushes screaming. asking, how willing are you to dive into your own grief for the sake of a memory? I've always wondered how this game garnered its cult status here in the West. I genuinely can't tell if this game flew under the radar for some people. Apparently, it has a positive reputation in Japan, but I rarely ever hear about Sanabi outside of my own circles, or something like game dev message boards. This is one of those games that could literally drown in the sea of other pixel art cyberpunk games, but that opening mystery is so interesting that on my first run, it made me legitimately wonder if Mago City just experienced the rapture. I genuinely want to be wrong about this, because this being Wonder Potion's first game is nothing short of amazing, and I really wish people talked about it more. It goes without saying that I highly recommend playing this game. For $15, it's definitely worth your time, and if you don't like the price, there are some key resellers out there if you know where to look. Thanks for watching. I got more ideas in the pipeline, but I'm open to suggestions. You can send them to my mail address or in the comments below. Stay tuned next time for Metal Gear meets God Hand. Take care of yourselves, and see you next time.